Welcome to the Colts Squad Show. I'm your host, Derek Schultz. And if you happen to hear any profanities on tonight's show, please give Alan Pinkett a little bit of a break.
And I'm Zach Hicks. And after watching college football this weekend, I'm finally ready for this NFL season to start.
I'm Jake Arthur. It's starting to smell a little bit like football in here, y'all.
And this is Alan Pinkett. You see, I'm representing, so hopefully I won't cuss.
Colts Nation, rise up. It's the Colts Squad. Everything Indianapolis Colts every week. Covering all the big hits and game-changing plays from the Circle City, the way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. It's time to squad up. The Colts Squad Show starts now.
Welcome in another edition of the Colts Squad Show here on the Locked On Colts Network. Today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Hi, everybody. I'm Derek Schultz. I've been a sports talker in Indianapolis for too long, at least according to my wife. I'm joined by Notre Dame legend and a very nervous Alan Pinkett. Notre Dame Miami going on right now while we're live streaming this on Sunday night in South Beach. Also nervous, Jake Arthur, a fellow Notre Dame fan, and of course you everydayers know her from Locked On Colts, and Zach Hicks, everybody's favorite film buff. Today we won't be talking Notre Dame Miami, we'll be talking Colts instead because it is game week, kind of sort of officially here as we get closer to the start of the 2025 NFL season. We'll be talking about the Colts red flags, so things that give you pause about this team. And I'm not just talking about the quarterback position. We're going to go a little more in depth than that. Possible on-field roles for Anthony Richardson. Speaking of the quarterbacks, we know he's not the starter. Could he be used in other areas for the Colts? We'll discuss that. I'm wary of this, and I wanted to present this to the group. This is something that I've been nervous about for a long time, and I'm sorry if we have any Dolphins fans listening to this. I really don't want the Colts to become the Dolphins, and I'm worried that they're becoming the Dolphins. I'll tell you what I mean coming up a little bit later on the show. And then one of our final position group previews coming up here with the tight ends and first-round pick Tyler Warren and the rest of the crew of holdovers who you remember from the last couple of seasons. But, guys, let's start things off here. And I kind of hate starting things off like this because, you want to get excited and optimistic. It's NFL football week and the whole deal. And we're going to talk about, oh my God, these are the things that I'm super worried about when it comes to the Colts. But red flags. I mean, everybody's got them. All 32 NFL teams have something. Okay, if blank happens, this is bad. Or I'm really nervous they didn't address blank. Let's go around the room and just kind of talk about when you look at this roster, when you look at what they're presumably going to put on the field on Sunday. Zach, what are you most nervous about?
I think the one thing for me, aside from the quarterback room, which we've talked about just ad nauseum this entire offseason here, it's the defensive line, the defensive line depth in particular, because when it comes to defensive line play, these guys are not playing 100% of the snaps. So we can look at other positions and say like, oh yeah, O-line depth is concerning, but like in a perfect world, those guys are healthy all year. They'd never come off the field. Same with safety depth, same with cornerback depth. Those guys play almost 100 snaps a game, 100% of the snaps a game. So you're not as worried about depth there at those positions until an injury does happen. On the defensive line, even without injuries, you're going to be playing 7, 8, 9 guys a game, on the defensive line. And you're going to need your third defensive tackle to be a quality player, your fourth defensive tackle to be a quality player, your third and fourth and fifth edge rushers to be quality players in that rotation. And I'm really concerned about that with the Colts. I like their starting four. I think you have a good thing with Kwity Paye and Laiatu Latu. I think they can be a pretty high floor duo. And then Latu hopefully can take that next step and become a legit finisher of sacks this year. And then the interior duo is just awesome with Grover Stewart and DeForest Buckner. But behind those guys, you get journeyman Neville Gallimore, you get Adetomiwa Adebawore, who just has never really been good in run defense and hasn't really had much of a role in the NFL. And then off the edge, you're relying on Tyquan Lewis, a 30-year-old defensive end, Samson Ebukam, a 30-year-old defensive end coming off an Achilles injury. That's not even a year. He's a little over a year removed from that injury. So a little concerning there. And then a rookie in the second round who was playing into the fourth quarter of preseason games and JT Tuimoloau, who I think he's going to be good, but it's just going to take some time with him. So I'm worried about the waves up front. I'm worried about what happens when Grover Stewart comes off the field for a couple snaps a game. I'm worried about if an injury happens on that defensive line, can they survive much of anything, in terms of run defense or even getting pressure on the quarterback? So I think this defensive line is going to be make or break for this defense this year, just in terms of, can they raise the floor while they get healthy on the back end with the secondary. Nick Cross has been banged up recently. Jalen Jones has been banged up recently. Can that defensive line carry play until those guys are healthy? Or are we going to see this like lackluster depth really come into play early in the season, like we've seen in the past, where like, again, when one of Grover Stewart or Forrest Buckner have come off the field in recent years, the run defense has been just atrocious. And I'm not super inspired by the guys behind them right now to pick up the pace and run defense, especially in a defense that's going to be a nickel 90+% of the time this year. You need that defensive line to be stout and run defense. And if Grover or Buckner are off the field, I don't think they're going to be that this year. So I am a bit concerned with this defensive line depth. And it's kind of part of the reason why I've said like Laiatu Latu needs to be a superstar this year, or this defensive line might not be good enough for this defense.
Got some tough news because Zach's a little nervous about the D-line. Football's one in the trenches. I've got my curiosities about the offensive line. Not so much the interior as much as offensive tackle. So Bernard Ryman and Braden Smith, healthy as starters, I think that's a good duo. But the problem is both those guys tend to be banged up. Braden Smith, it's been fine over the summer, like with his health, like he hasn't had to miss a bunch of time. But I've seen him get beaten, by his one-on-one man quite a bit. And it's usually Laiatu Latu. So while we would like to hope that's more of a sign for Latu's growth, we do have to kind of take that with a grain of salt and say, Braden may be losing a step there. And then Bernard Ryman, of course, has missed a little bit of time throughout his career. Right now, you're relying on Jalen Travis, a rookie, a mid-round rookie. It's not like he was a first or second-round pick either, and Luke Tenuta. And that was after you already had Blake Freeland, who we already felt shaky about, suffered that season-ending leg injury. So right now, I think it would be a little wild of them to go in within the first couple of weeks of the season how things are right now. Like they have really addressed linebacker aggressively, which is if you're looking at positions on a roster, it's kind of a non-essential position. Like you can get through with that. And they themselves have told us there's not an enormous premium on it, but they're addressing it like it is lately. And then cornerback, obviously. But offensive tackle, which is a premium position, and you chose the quarterback that is not going to be as good at avoiding sacks, you have to plan ahead like your offensive line is going to have some injuries this year because it always does, and it's the NFL. It does with everyone. So if Braden Smith goes down, you have Jalen Travis go out there. I feel okay about seeing what that looks like. But if you get to the point where Luke Tenuta is out there as well or instead of Travis, I don't feel as good about that. The guy's been around for 2-3 years, hopping around, with the Colts and I think a couple other teams. He's just now on the roster because of Freeland's injury. So I have a little bit of trepidation when it comes to what is likely going to be the inevitable offensive tackle injury.
You both make great points, Zach, in terms of the defensive line. I would have loved to have seen Kwity Paye get a few snaps in just in the preseason, just to get the blood flowing a little bit, get used to the speed of the game. But he's a vet, and I trust he's going to be okay. But I had a much larger concern about the offensive line. And Jake, you hit the nail on the head. When you look at the depth chart, they don't list anybody behind Raymond, but I know that they have two other tackles that can, interchange, go play left or right side. But that left tackle is such a security blanket for the quarterback. That quarterback can drop back with ease in his mind, knowing he's got $100 million man protecting him on that backside. When a new lineman comes in, they've got to get caught up with the flow of the game, the speed of the game, and it makes the quarterback nervous as hell. So I would love to see that be a little more solidified. Maybe Raymond is just a badass and is going to play every damn snap, and just be solid. But that's the only red flag I see when I look at the entire lineup, because I think the Colts have done a good job establishing, you know, good competition and viable, productive NFL players at all the other positions. But at offensive line, would love to see him have a little more depth.
Yeah,
Yeah,
one
I
thing
think.
I want to, sorry, Derek, one thing I wanted
Right.
to throw in there real quick that we're not really factoring in too much with the offensive tackles is I think if they did get down to their fourth offensive tackle being on the field, I think Matt Gonsalves would probably kick back out to right tackle in that scenario, and they would put Jalen Travis over at left tackle. I'm not saying that's perfect by any
It's
means,
still a
but
hodgepodge, though. It's
it is.
disruptive.
It
Yeah.
is, but I guess my slight counter would be, is there any team in the NFL that has a fourth offensive tackle that they can rely on? Because a lot of teams don't have a second offensive tackle that they can rely
Yeah.
on, let alone a third or a fourth. So I think it's going to look dicey for just about anybody at an offensive tackle. But I do agree, like a Luke Tenuta doesn't inspire a ton of confidence there. But I think that Gonsalves would probably kick out, and then it would be Tucker or Pinter going into the starting lineup on the interior, which again, concerns for sure.
Yeah.
But I do think that it's not just as like Luke Tenuta would be their fourth guy. I think currently he's on the roster, but I think they would explore Gonsalves kicking back out.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement on the depth. In fact, I had just team-wide depth because
Right.
I think if you took the top 8 to 10 players in this roster, I think it stacks up pretty favorably with the rest of the NFL, right? Quentin Nelson, DeForest Buckner, these are like high-level NFL players. But if you extended that to the top 30 or 40, I think that's when the Colts start kind of going down the list. And they have a couple of positions, just to kind of echo what you said, Zach, and Jake, you and Alan. If one of their defensive tackles goes down, they're screwed. We've seen that.
Mhm.
At this point at corner, if Charvarius Ward goes down, they're screwed. Imagine if Tyler Warren goes down, and then basically you just have the 2024 tight end room all over again. So, yes, you would say that about a lot of positions on a lot of different NFL teams, but I do think it's very shaky. Like the Colts, if they're very healthy this year, you could talk yourself into this being a playoff team. If they have any semblance of poor injury luck, then they're really going to struggle, I think, even to get to, eight wins, because that's how it's like a house of cards to me. But to me, guys, what sticks out, and I don't know who coined this term. I borrowed it from somebody, and I don't know who to credit who I stole it from. I heard this a couple of years ago, the Chris Ballard blind spot. So every year you go into a year with a position group that the front office essentially ignores and says that we're fine. Remember wide receiver in 2021? Do you remember what they tried out there that year? I mean, it was a joke, right? And
Yeah.
or Dallas Flowers. And I'm sorry if Dallas Flowers listens to this show, I feel terrible because we bring up Dallas Flowers on every show, and he seems like a very nice guy. But Dallas Flowers as your starting corner, like, come on. Linebacker. They have Zaire Franklin, they have Joe Bocci, and then they have a bunch of special teamers. And I do wonder if the Hunter Wohler injury factors in here as well. Like, I get it. Lou Anarumo doesn't maybe rely on this as much in his scheme, but still, imagine if Franklin goes down. And even Franklin, Franklin's a very good player, but I'm watching games sometimes where I want to throw the remote at the TV because of something Zaire Franklin did. I think most Colts fans sort of feel the same way. So I just worry about that position group at the moment because I think by far it is the weakest on the entire team. And even if it's the least important in this scheme, you still want to be a little bit better at that spot.
Yeah, and one thing to mention too with linebackers, you said it's Franklin, Bocci, and a bunch of special teamers. I know we're riding the Joe Bocci hot train right now, and I'm excited for Joe Bocci, but Joe Bocci's been a special teamer his whole career.
Yeah, fair.
He's not like a solidified starter in the NFL. Like, he has a great opportunity in front of him to solidify himself, but he's never been anything more than a special teamer in this league. And we're kind of counting him as like, well, at least we can rely on Joe Bocci when, he's 27, 28 years old, and no other team has relied on him at this point. So yeah, the linebacker group is certainly concerning. And I think at the end of the day, for me, when it comes to this Colts team, for them to be this playoff team they want to be this year, they have to go back to kind of old school football, is run the ball well and stop the run. And that starts with the trenches on both sides of the ball. And if we have our biggest concerns right now are the trenches or trench depth or the linebacker room, that could be the make or break of this entire season. That could ride this train into the playoffs like they want, or it could derail it pretty early in the season. Because if your trenches are not dominant with, again, the style of offense they want to play this year, you're not going to win many games. So I think the biggest red flag in just general is, are these trenches good enough, or can they stay healthy enough this year to play the type of football the Colts want to play this year? And I guess that'll be the big thing that we'll have to see, especially in week 1 here against the Miami Dolphins.
And speaking in general, the salary cap is what depletes your depth. Because when you do pick a guy that you're going to pay heavily, they're automatically looking for the cheapest person they can find to back them up. I remember, I got to go back 100 years when I played, when you had a good quality depth, but the advent of free agency, it sort of took away that middle class you had in the NFL. So, like when the Steelers won all those Super Bowls in the 70s, I mean, they had backups that were, yeah, very, very good. They could hide, some of those players, but with the salary cap, every single team has to pay attention to the depth, and every team has red flags, knowing that, well, I paid this one guy at right tackle, so I'm looking for the cheapest backup right tackle I can find and hope my right tackle doesn't go down anytime soon, or he's just going to have to play hurt. So it's a concern, and it's a concern, and I'm glad that we address it. But every single team is having to address it because of the economics of the NFL.
It's like what NIL's done to Alabama, right, Alan? Where now everybody's got those high-priced guys, right? Everybody's paying.
They do.
So you can't just stack those dudes as your second or third linebacker back there anymore, because they're going to go chase that money somewhere else. Yeah, and just to kind of tie up on this conversation, and Jake, since you are boots on the ground, I wanted to ask you about this, if you felt this at all. Another thing that is a red flag to me is that maybe you could say this about the 2022 season. I understand that Frank Reich got fired and it was coming off the collapse, but really, I think this is the first true pressure cooker season where multiple jobs are really on the line since the 2016 campaign. Remember, coming off 2015 and everything imploded, and they gave Ryan Grigson one more year and they tied him together with Chuck Pagano. The Colts, to be fair, have made no indication that Chris Ballard's job is on the line, but his most patient defender is, not to be morbid, is no longer with us. So I do wonder if that's going to factor in, especially if things go south early for this team.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we all thought last year, at the end of last year. I think we all were pretty shocked that both men were retained going into this offseason. And I don't think there's anywhere to hide anymore. Zach and I discussed this the other day on our show. They have been uncharacteristically aggressive and intentional. And like so much of what they've done are win now moves that, again, there's nowhere else to hide. If this doesn't work, what's the excuse? Like everything you've done, you shelled out $60 million contracts to Ward and Bynum. You go out, and normally if you suffer an injury to your cornerback, you're like, all right, well, let's see what this guy who entered camp as the sixth corner is going to do. No, you go out and you get Xavier Howard. You go out and you get a Chad Muma. Like, you're getting guys that have played, and for the degree, like for the level of move it's a serious version of it. You know what I mean? Like, you're not always going to get a Chad Muma or something. Like, that's someone with name recognition. Xavier Howard, that's someone who we all know and has been an All-Pro before. So they're not just kind of like sitting on their hands anymore with some of these moves and just testing their depth. The moves they're making show urgency. I think that's the term that Zach used the other day, and that's true. They have thrown development out the door this year. You're going to see, I think, a lot of guys, especially on the defensive side of the ball with Lou, who, until those young guys are ready to play, you're going to see a lot of veterans, and it's probably going to be frustrating at times for some guys who you're going to see probably some boring veterans who aren't maybe being very productive on the field over younger, more exciting players, but that's who the coaches trust and think is going to result in wins. So yeah, there's so much of this offseason that kind of shows their hand, that they're feeling the pressure as well, because they've been very uncharacteristic since January.
And one of those decisions, of course, perhaps the biggest one, was to go to Daniel Jones to show
absolutely.
that. And even though he is not the starting quarterback, are there possible on-field roles for Anthony Richardson? Shane Steichen maybe can get creative a little bit? I don't know. We're going to discuss when the Colts Squad Show returns. This portion of the show brought to you by our friends at 5 Hour Energy. Time to fuel up and turn it up with 5 Hour Energy Transfusion. It brings the bold grape, ginger, and lime flavor of your favorite golf drink, minus the alcohol, into a quick, energizing shot. Whether you're seeking birdies or just making memories with friends, this one's a hole-in-one for your energy game. As temperatures dip and the calendar turns to fall, we're already getting beautiful fall weather here in central Indiana. It's the best time of year to get out onto the course and enjoy a round comfortably. When you're not sweating to death, you can get out there with friends. And or if you're like me and you're a real noob and intermediate, you can go out there on a par 3 course and just kind of hack away, have some fun, and enjoy the beautiful weather and be there out there with your buddies. That's because golf's all about good times with good people. And good flavors, of course. The grape, ginger, lime flavor gives you the best parts of your clubhouse go-to without chasing down the beverage cart. If you go to 5hourenergy.com today, that's the number 5hourenergy.com. You can use our promo code Locked On Golf to receive 20% off your order. That's Locked On Golf to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th. On one order, it cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Whether you're meeting up with friends or trying to turn 18 holes into 36, get the energizing boost you need to power through. Order transfusion-flavored 5-Hour Energy shots today. And we're back on the Locked On Colts Squad show alongside Notre Dame legend Alan Pinkett and Jake Arthur and Zach Hicks, the dynamic duo from Locked On Colts. I'm your host, Derek Schultz, and I have not checked the Notre Dame score in the first 20 minutes here.
14-7 at half.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not even going to ask you who's leading.
It's Miami.
Because you're saying,
Okay. Should have followed up with that.
now you've completely ruined this for me, but that's okay. Let's talk about Anthony Richardson, guys. And I know, like, some of the people at home are probably like thinking to themselves, oh my God, are these guys just going to shoehorn ways to talking to Anthony Richardson? I saw something from our friend Joel A. Erickson of the Indy Star, who does an awesome job. And he had mentioned, maybe finding ways to get Richardson on the field. And the fact that he's 5 for 6 in and 1 situations on the ground. Now, that is a very small sample size, but I was thinking to myself, not that long ago, and it was a different coaching staff. I remember the Colts kind of did this with Jacoby Brissett. Remember when in the Phillip Rivers season? Because Phillip Rivers was 482 years old, so they weren't going to run him up the middle on 4th and 1s. But Jacoby Brissett's a big, thick dude.
He was
and
awesome
he had a knack for getting them, right? And so I think, hopefully Richardson can be a little bit more than that. But it's worth pointing out, they didn't bring him into situations to do that last year in the small sample where Joe Flacco was out there, where they had maybe chances to do that. But, Zach, I'll start with you. Is there any way? I mean, are you expecting them to potentially find, a red zone package? I don't know, a Hail Mary at the end of the half because he's got such a big arm. Is there a way to get Anthony Richardson on the field, and do you think Shane Steichen will utilize that?
I think there's certainly a way to get him on the field. I mean, we've seen teams in the past kind of play with things like this. I want to say the Steelers did it a little bit early last season with Justin Fields as their backup quarterback, or even when maybe it was like 2 years ago or something with the Bears. One of those teams with Justin Fields has done this, where Fields would come in for a handful of snaps, do some of the read option stuff, do some of the little fun play around stuff, and then you would get back to your quarterback that is your starter to throw the ball. And I think if you really are about all winning this year, like winning no matter what, I think getting Richardson out there for some short yardage packages certainly does favor your team a little bit. Because we saw last year, again, regardless of what you want to say about Richardson, when it came to those like 3rd and 1s, 4th and 1s, and the Colts would roll out this awesome QB counter sweep play to the short side of the field with Richardson getting out in space behind a tight end lead blocker, and all he had to do was meet a cornerback on the outside. There's no corner in football that was making that tackle. And the Colts ran it to success multiple times. I think the first game they rolled it out last year was actually against Miami. They ran it 3 times and twice on that last drive to put the game away and get that put away field goal. So I think there are ways to get him in there, especially again, around the goal line. We saw that Jets finale last year, right on the 1 yard line. They needed to score that touchdown under a minute to go. They run the quarterback sweep, and he's able to run over a corner and get in the end zone. And if you want to win games this year, get him out there to run over some dudes in the run game. But will they do that? I'm not sure. I think that's the big question here, because, I know this Colts coaching staff from talking with some people on the staff. They watch a lot of college film in the offseason on how to utilize the QB run game. They are big fans of just the QBs in the run game. Aside from Richardson, just even going back to working with Jalen Hurts, they've loved using quarterbacks in the run game. So they watch teams like Ole Miss and Liberty and a lot of college teams that like to utilize really fun aspects of the QB run game. And if you don't think Jones can do all that, you can certainly get Richardson out there for some packages. But again, the NFL is different than college. It is tough to make those switches for players. It's tough to kind of incorporate a second quarterback out there. So do I think they're ultimately going to do it? No, I don't think we're going to see much of it. Again, maybe you could see it on like QB sneaks or something. But even then, Richardson's fumbled a couple QB sneaks in the NFL at this point. So I don't think we're going to see much of it. But personally, again, if you want to win more games this year, I think if you get into like a 4th and 1 situation, a 3rd and 1 situation, and you can get some QB sweeps in there where it's like, look, even if the other team knows it's coming, we saw last year the Jets knew that Richardson was running the ball on that QB sweep on the 1 yard line, and he ran over a defensive back. The Patriots knew a QB power was coming on that 2-point conversion to win the game. And what happened? Richardson ran through the guy. I mean, we saw this happen multiple times last year. So I think even if a team knows the QB run is coming, he can get by them and get that first down. So yeah, long rant short here. Yeah, if you want to win more games, get him out there on those 3rd and 1s, 4th and 1s. You can have a package for him. I just ultimately don't think it's going to be much in the cards this year, just because the NFL doesn't really do that too often.
Well, at 200, I'll go at 244 pounds. You think that, running him up inside or running him around the corner would be something good to do, but NFL teams are reluctant to have their quarterbacks run because they pay them too damn much money, and they don't want them getting hurt running the football. So I would love to see him in there being able to run with all that weight. I always, small running backs like me, what we would do is we would say to big backs, sometimes we see big backs, like I see an Eddie George or a Christian Okoye. And we would say to them, boy, if I had your size, I'd be running over everybody, because sometimes we see a big back just tiptoe around the corner or go down too easy when we've got to fight and scratch. There's a small back for every yard. So that weight, when you use it efficiently, is very, very good. But like I said, management doesn't like to see the quarterback get hit running the football. And I'm sure, like up in Buffalo, Josh Allen loves to run. And I know they hold their breath every single time he tucks that thing in his arm and goes downfield. But what I would love to see is, maybe a Philly special type thing where they put him in a slot, run him in motion, and pitch it to him, and he throws it downfield to someone else. Or, they split him out wide, and he takes a couple steps back, and they make sure it's a backwards pass so he can throw it to a post coming over the middle from the opposite side. I would like something like that just on film to make the other defensive coordinators have to prepare for it if he comes in. Or if you're really worried about him, taking a beating, run one of these little wide screen plays and have a blocker out there in front of him. Set him and a tight end out there so he's got a lead blocker. But hell yeah, you can utilize him, but it wouldn't necessarily be quarterback type things he would be doing to be effective.
Allen's trying to get that 80 Mitchell play redone, but with Richardson throwing the ball back to Daniel Jones instead of 80 Mitchell throwing it back there. But yeah, no, I agree with you, Allen. Like, I think ideally you don't want that quarterback taking hits, but to me, if your playbook is like 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, we like this QB counter sweep play a lot. Well, we're going to save Daniel Jones from taking that hit, and our backup quarterback will just take that hit instead.
Yeah.
If you're truly bought into winning this year and Jones is the best guy who gets you those wins, give Richardson those big hits at quarterback if that's going to get you the first down. I know your backup quarterback is valuable, but you know what's more valuable than the backup quarterback? The starting quarterback. So that's just kind of where my thought process is. I don't know if it's going to happen, but that's kind of where I am with, the short yardage QB run game.
Now, Alan and I are out here envisioning the Everett Golson, Tommy Reese offense.
I'm trying to tone it down. I'm just saying one little package.
We're going chaos.
Some wide receiver sweep.
Anthony's the new starter. You let him go throughout the game until the 4th quarter when it's too uncomfortable, and that's when Daniel Jones, aka Tommy Reese, comes in. No, but I don't think they'll get too cute with it, but I do think Shane would be a little naive not to acknowledge that Anthony's one of his most dangerous red zone weapons. So in similar ways that we're likely to see Tyler Warren used in exotic ways, I think occasionally we might see Anthony out there, but partly because Shane is also a coach that is willing to get a little weird with it at times. He is a guy, Zach, you mentioned, like, he's not afraid to get inspiration from anywhere when it comes to the game of football. Does not matter. If he sees something he thinks he can tweak and make work in the NFL, he'll do it. So while I don't think there's going to be like a regular role for Anthony, that small sample size, like when Joe Flacco was starting last year, that's kind of a different situation. That was very much big timeout energy for Anthony. Like, take a timeout, figure things out, and just do that. Now they have time to prepare, like all chips in with Daniel Jones for now, and then they can still figure out some way to use Anthony other than as the scout team quarterback. But yeah, let's just say Daniel is healthy for all 17 games, plus the postseason as well, of course. That we'll see Anthony a handful of times in the red zone specifically. I don't know that it'll be like a 4th and 1 around the 50-yard line or so. That's a big gamble, but I think wise money says that they're going to want to use Anthony's prowess down near the end zone at some point.
I think Ben Aris here, I hope I said your last name right there, Ben, but Ben says it here in the comment section, and I've been saying this a couple times the offseason as well. I think all these like short yardage things that I'm saying that Richardson could do, I think they're going to use Tyler Warren for a good chunk of that this year.
Yeah,
it's what he did last year at Penn State. And again, Shane Steichen's goofy, man. We saw Zaire Franklin at tight end and fullback in the past. You can Grover Stewart, DeForest Buckner get offensive snaps. I think we're going to see some of Tyler Warren in that Wildcat quarterback mode if it's not going to be Richardson. If it really is like just keep Richardson off the field, let him sit and watch this year, then I think they still want to do some of that like power QB run stuff. I think Tyler Warren will get some Wildcat snaps this year.
I'm confident in that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think you guys are all wrong because I'm looking here. Daniel Jones ran for 700 yards and 5.9 yards per carry in 2022.
End of
and
discussion.
as we know, 2022 is super relevant in 2025. So
he has not had an ACL and neck injury since then.
No, nothing. There's no other context to add into the conversation. No, but in all seriousness, unlike Phillip Rivers or I don't know, Matt Ryan, or, even if you want to go way back, Peyton Manning, you don't have a statue back there, right? Jones can run a little bit. He can't run like Richardson, but he can run a little bit. And so I don't know, maybe that changes the dynamic a little bit than having like a straight, like Brissett comes in every 4th down sneak like they did a couple of years ago. But it'll be interesting to see because, as we know, if Richardson comes in and does something great, then people talk, right? And fans get excited.
That'll be part of it. I think that'll be part of it for sure, and why I don't think we'll see him on the field. But to your point about Jones, I think he will help them do a lot of the read option stuff they want to do, and they will run a lot of that read option. I'm specifically talking about QB power stuff because you don't want Jones lowering his shoulder against a defensive tackle. Whereas a Tyler Warren or even your backup in Richardson, who's 245 to 250, like you prefer that than Jones, who even if he is like a 225, 230 quarterback who can run, I don't want my starting quarterback lowering his right shoulder on anybody. Yeah,
I'm in agreement with you because in college it's one thing to run and hit like a 300-pound defensive lineman, but in the NFL, these guys are professional tacklers. They know how to hit you to hurt you. And so why take a chance on your future investment running them up inside the offensive line when he's back there to throw the ball?
Yeah.
No doubt about that. We all know the recent history when it comes to this Colts team of being firmly stuck in the middle. Are they in danger of becoming their week 1 opponent long-term? We'll discuss when the Colts Squad Show returns. This portion of the show brought to you by Gametime. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Gametime comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you could splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Gametime makes it possible. Gametime makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch. And they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. Game Time has been super convenient for me before. In fact, even when I didn't end up buying tickets through Game Time, I went on the Game Time app. I did this late last night. The Yankees were almost about to sweep the Chicago White Sox. And I'm like, hey, my wife has to sleep. She's on rotation. Chicago's a 3.5-hour drive. I'm going to take James. We're going to go watch the Yankees sweep the White Sox. I'm actually glad that I didn't. They ended up losing today, even though Aaron Judge hit a home run in the game. But I went through the Game Time app, and I was ready to go right there. And ended up backing out last second. But most of the time, I'm on the Game Time app, and I'm taking it. I'm going to Cincinnati. I'm going to St. Louis. I'm going all over the place. We have all these great ballparks right around here in central Indiana, and you can take advantage of it too. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Create an account. Use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. And we're back on the Locked On Colts Squad Show. Thanks so much for joining us. Alongside Alan Pinkett, Jake Arthur, and Zach Hicks, I'm Derek Schultz. So Miami is the week one opponent, the Dolphins, who have been a team that is they're not really good. They're not really bad. They're just kind of there. That's, for the most part, what they've been. Miami has one division title and 0 playoff wins since 2000. But they've had 16 seasons in that span of 7 or more wins. They're 215 and 223 this century. And if you take out an outlier 1-15 season, they're 214 and 208. So, I mean, you talk about middle. I mean, that's about as middle as it gets. I know they had an 11-win team that ended up losing to Arrowhead a couple years ago that I thought was a pretty good team. They had that weird Tony Sperano team that after the 1-15 season, they came out of nowhere and won 11 games. They still didn't win a playoff game, but that was their only AFC East division title in that span. That was when Brady blew out his ACL in week 1. And so I think I'm being over dramatic here, guys, but the Colts have been firmly in the middle, really for the better part of the last 10 years. I understand there's 2 4-win seasons in there, right? But for the last 10 years, for the most part, they've been 8-9, 9-8, right in that range. And I think as it takes a while to figure out the quarterback situation, which the Dolphins have had to do for a long time, for a better part of this 21st century, those are the teams that get kind of trapped in there. So I'll ask you, Zach, are the Colts destined to be stuck? I think it's the worst place. I shouldn't say the worst place to be, because Cleveland and Jacksonville is, there are, in Washington forever, right? There are truly poorly run franchises that are at the bottom and they stay at the bottom. But all intents and purposes, it's a really bad place to be. It's difficult to get better when you're picking 14th every year.
Yeah, it's kind of the worst place to be for a fan, I think, for sure.
Yeah.
For ownership and for GMs and for head coaches, you're always convinced that you're like, sorry, you just need a couple more bounces. Derek did not want me talking there. You have a couple more bounces to go your way, and you'll be able to figure this thing out. But for fans, you feel like you're just stuck in this like everlasting loop, and you have no way to get out of it unless you get lucky in the draft in terms of getting your quarterback somehow around pick 14, 15, 16, and you're just kind of stuck there, And I think for fans, like, it's almost as bad as being the Clevelands or the Jacksonvilles, because like the horrible part of being like those really bad teams, you always know what's coming, even though you get excited coming into a year, but you know what's coming. You kind of feel that way when you're stuck in the middle as well. Like, you can get all excited about certain things, but you always kind of know what's coming when you don't have the quarterback. And what we see from a lot of teams is they'll have these ebbs and flows where they win 3 games and then they win 14, win 3, win 14. And the difference there is that when they won the 3 games, they got their quarterback. And now all of a sudden they're competing for division championships. I mean, look at the Bengals for such a long time. Post Carson Palmer, Andy Dalton came in there and did some good things for them. They were like that middle of the road type team. Then they blew up and fell all the way to the basement. And then they get Joe Burrow. And now they had a Super Bowl appearance a couple years ago. Their defense is kind of a mess, but they're able to, do some good things because that offense is so good. And that's kind of where, fans are looking at this stuff and like envying that, like, they envy tanking. They envy falling to the basement. I don't know if there's any like true metric that shows like it's better just to fall out to the basement for 1 year or 2 years and just get lucky with the quarterback. Because again, you're counting on so much luck with that quarterback pick. But yeah, being in the middle of the road does suck for fans. It really does, because you always feel like the peak of what your team can get is getting blown out in round 1 of the playoffs. But if you're an ownership, like, you don't want to tank, you don't want to drop to the basement, because even then that might not fix it. You're always at risk of becoming Cleveland, and that's what you never want to be that. You'd rather be middle of the road than Cleveland. So it's tough. It really is a tough situation. But to answer your question here, the Colts have been that since I've covered this team. That's the only Colts I know are the Dolphins Colts, the middle of the road Colts. I saw little glimpses with Rivers and Luck, but for the most part, they've just been this middle of the road adequate team, and they seem content with it. So we'll see what the direction is after the season, regardless if they make the playoffs or not, what Carly Ursay wants to do, what the rest of the ownership group and people want to do. But yeah, I will say the Colts have been, you tell me Dolphins and Colts, they've been like the same team in my head since I've covered the NFL. And since I got out of high school, they've been that. So I don't think they're like dangerously closing in on being the Dolphins. I think they're kind of there right now.
Yeah, it is just such a dangerous middle ground, and no one wants to be that bad. But at the same time, you either have to be aggressive if you're sitting there in the middle of the first round, which the Colts have not been. They're very fine to just sit there and let whatever they want come to them. Not being aggressive doesn't get you anywhere. Like even Washington in that Andrew Luck RG3 year went all the way up to the number 2 pick. It was the Rams there initially. So they changed their own destiny. That worked for them initially, like immediately, until RG3's injury. Until the injury. Zach knows all about that. But
that was so painful, Jake. That was awful for me right there. You brought up Luck and RG3, just killing me.
Hey, well, yeah, we got to get both daggers out of the way. But no, it's a hard pill to swallow because for so long here in Indy, since I've been a football fan, either Peyton Manning or Andrew Luck was mostly the quarterback of this team, and then now it's the retirement home or the revolving door of quarterbacks, and no success is ever sustained. You get a couple good squads in there, like the 2019 team, 2021. Like those were decent teams if they had better quarterback play. 2020, obviously, but like overall, if you don't have like a young quarterback that is clearly your future, you're just sitting here wondering what's next. Like even if Anthony Richardson was the quarterback this year, we still would have been looking forward to draft time. Like it's hard to establish yourself as a no doubt go-to franchise guy with the start to the career you've had. So it really all ties back to quarterback. You can have a well-built roster outside of that, but if you don't have that young quarterback, you are just going to be just floating around, treading water and surviving. That's kind of how we've described Chris Ballard for the last several years, is he's just a survivor. There are bullets that are flying all the time, and it always manages to hit somebody else. But Chris Ballard has built a roster that sustains and is competitive, but it's unspectacular without the most important position fulfilled, which they've tried to do. They've just done it unsuccessfully. So, yeah, I mean, who knows what this is going to look like next year, next offseason. I think you obviously need the new quarterback to get things moving in the right direction. If you finish around that, 8 and 9 or whatever it is, you got to be aggressive and get up around that top 5 to get the quarterback, because letting things fall to you does not work. You have to go do it. I think Josh Allen was traded up for. Patrick Mahomes was traded up for. If Trey Lance would have worked out for the 49ers, he was traded up for. You have got to be intentional about going and changing your future. It does not work if you just sit there and let it happen to you.
Well, point of emphasis, you either have that guy or you don't have that guy.
Yep.
And when you have that guy, you go on those runs and you relish it. When you don't have that guy, I think that the Colts thought they had that guy and were getting out of the middle by selecting Tyler Warren as their first round draft pick. Now, there's one more weapon for Anthony Richardson to use. But now that Daniel Jones is the starter, you kind of feel like you're kind of falling back into the middle. Now, I can understand what you say about the Dolphins, because McDaniel's first 2 years, they did make the playoffs. And, he comes over as this, boy wizard, Yale graduate, just knows all the X's and O's and the ins and outs about how to run an offense. But to me, the Dolphins fell in the middle because they have no plan when it comes to a backup quarterback. It's either Tua or it's bust. And that's what takes them down to the middle. They don't even look like the same damn team when Tua's not playing. So at least you got some, it looks like consistency at quarterback now, and we're going to see if the system is going to work. All the different pieces that they've put together, it makes it look like they could make that little leap out of the middle. But we're just going to have to wait and see the games, make sure everyone stays healthy, all that type of things. But initially, I hear what you're saying, Derek, about you don't want to, you feel like you're in the middle. But I thought they addressed that when they got Tyler Warren.
Yeah, I think they went out. They saw that was their weakest position group, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they went out and did that. But from the player perspective, Alan, does even get frustrated in the locker room? Like you guys in Houston, you were above where the Colts were. Like you were in the playoffs every year. You were always making the playoffs. Like you were winning double-digit games and all that. But then there was Denver or the other AFC powers of that time, and it felt like a little bit of a glass ceiling that you guys were routinely trying to break through. What's that like to kind of go through it year after year? Because I think we've felt, it was painted as being frustrated with the quarterback situation, but I think as much as is the quarterback situation, I think Quentin Nelson, the other guys in the locker room were like, God, I just don't want to go 8-9 again. You know what I mean? Like, I think it was just the frustration of being stuck as well.
Well, as a player, all owners like making money. You don't know if all owners like to win, because the current business model is being in the middle, because you get all those the gate and interest in the team, but you don't have to spend the extra expense of going through the playoffs. So 8-9 is the perfect business model for ownership, but for the players, we can see sometimes where we might be lacking in an area and it doesn't get addressed. And we also know as a player that, it's just a matter of inches a lot of times. It's in this one play. If we can, just make that one block and make the run, then it's first down instead of fourth down. It's just, it comes down to sometimes luck and bad bounces, but you also count on management to put you in the best position by putting the best players at each position. I'm not making any indictments about what the Colts are doing, but as a player, you see that sometimes you win in spite of the team. And what happened with us when I was with the Oilers is my first year we went 4-12, but we liked each other, and we realized if we want to stay around each other, we need to start winning. So we just made the conscious decision: we're going to start winning. That way, we were able to have some cohesion. We were able to gel a little bit and develop some great friendships and relationships because we won. So it's hard to answer the question, but there's just a lot of parts there. There's the player part, there's the management part, and sometimes management is reluctant to spend the extra money to put you over the top. But the players, the onus is on the player just to go out and make plays.
The good news is I do have confidence that management now is very determined to get back to what they had. With Carly Say Gordon, I think they all know that none of this with the team exists if not for the glory days. And how much different does it look if they would have been, how the Broncos were looking for John Elway every year back in the day, the Bears, these kind of just mad Dolphins-ish teams, that is not what gets them where they want to go. So I do have confidence that they legitimately are trying to put out the best product possible. And unfortunately, like with that, we're just going to have to wait until next offseason to see what that looks like, I think.
Yeah, no question. Our position group previews continue when we come back for a final time on the Colts Squad Show. And we agreed that all of this room absolutely needed and ended up getting a big upgrade. In fact, that big upgrade's name has been mentioned already on this show multiple times. And we haven't even gotten to the tight ends yet. We're going to talk about it next on the Colts Squad Show. Back for a final time, Colts Squad Show. Alan Pinkett, Jake Arthur, Zach Hicks, and Derek Schultz. Thanks so much for joining us. Let's move on over to the tight ends, fellas. Tyler Warren headlining that group this year, and thank goodness for that. But I will say, as much hand-wringing as was done, I'm being nice about the tight end room last year. You've got 3/4 of that room back, and I think the other three guys, I mean, I guess we could start with Warren if you really wanted to, but I actually kind of wanted to give the other three guys their flowers. You know, Will Mallory had a great camp in an offseason, went out and definitively won the job. It wasn't a default thing. It wasn't like Jelani Woods got hurt or something. You're like, fine, we're going to keep him as our fourth guy. Drew Ogletree plays a role as a great blocker. And Mo Alley-Cox is entering his 19th season, I believe, with the Colts. That may be unofficial right now, but he's been there forever. I like the depth that they have. Like, I like all those guys as backups. I just didn't like those guys as primary targets. And I think now that Warren has entered the mix, Zach, you make that whole room shines just because now you have your TE1 and all those guys can settle into their roles that they are meant to be.
Yeah, it's kind of like having a good pass rush room where when you have that top dog, that alpha pass rusher who can finish sacks, it clearly defines what everyone else has to do. So, like, for instance, if Leatu Latu has a step this year and emerges as that guy, then Kwity Paye being your edge setter and your guy who can just finish sacks becomes more defined in his role. Now we go over to tight end, and look, Mo Alley-Cox gets a lot of hate for what he is because the Colts wanted him to be the next Jack Doyle after Doyle retired. And he's not a terrible player. He's just not that. He's not a starting caliber tight end in this league. But if we're talking about a 12 personnel backup tight end who is a really good blocker, who can, I mean, look, he can pass block like a tight end sometimes out there. Or like a tackle sometimes, not like a tight end, like a tackle. He's a big, strong, physical player. He's made some big plays in the goal line and on 4th and 3rd downs in his career. I don't think he's this terrible player. He's just not a starting caliber player. So when you get a Tyler Warren to be that number one guy, and he's going to be just your pass catcher, he's going to be your fun fullback blocker as well, your fullback, like throwback player, your RPO screen guy, like you're going to use him in so many fun ways. Mo is a really good guy to have as a 12 personnel reserve tight end behind him who can just come in, catch like 8 passes this year and protect Warren and let Warren be the pass catcher that he is. So yeah, I think Mo Alley-Cox is a valuable player to have now that you have Tyler Warren. And then Drew Ogletree kind of fits in that same mold where, like, look, Ogletree's not a great pass catcher. We've seen enough of the drops. We've seen enough of just inability to get open down the field. But he's a very good run blocker. And he's a guy who has a little bit more versatility as a run blocker than Mo, where Mo is an inline guy. We saw Ogletree come back in the backfield a couple times. We saw him be, part of jumbo sets with Mo on 12 personnel where they really want to run it and be effective. Really good on those split zone runs, cracking back against the backside defensive end. So yeah, I think those guys are valuable players. And then you're just taking a shot on Mallory. You're seeing if Mallory can continually develop as that backup pass catcher, and maybe you can get some unique packages for him this year. But yeah, just having Tyler Warren on the roster, just in play here, clearly defines these guys to being what they're supposed to be. Now we don't need Mo to have a 40-catch season to be excited about him. He can have an 8-catch season as long as he allows Tyler Warren to be the Tyler Warren that he can do, that he can be. Then Mo's doing his job perfectly. But like that this is just so indicative of the NFL where some guys are just not star players. Some guys are just perfect complementary players. And it's fine. Like the online culture has to call everyone mid or bad if they are not perfect players or not these like star players. But like you can have complementary players. You can have players with utility. And I think having a guy like Mo Alley-Cox and having a guy like Drew Ogletree behind him just makes Tyler Warren better. And having Tyler Warren clearly defines those guys to being the role players they're supposed to be. It's like TJ McConnell with the Pacers. Great role player. It's awesome. He's not a star player in the NBA, but you need guys like that if you want to win. And that's what I think guys like Marley Cox, Drew Ogletree, and heck, maybe even Will Mallory this year could be.
No, I like this group quite a bit now, having a guy who is without a doubt your top pass catcher and just the guy that needs to stay on the field at all times. Like, the upgrade they got from Kylan Granson to Tyler Warren really cannot be understated, because I think Granson is like Philadelphia's tight end 3 or something now. And that's the guy you were relying on to like lead your tight end group in receiving. So an obvious upgrade there. But yeah, I think what you guys said just fits perfectly well. It allows everyone else to fill the roles they're supposed to, because before you were having to keep all these guys active and try and use them all to like fill all these small roles that you needed a tight end to fill. Well, now you got one guy who can kind of do it all. So you can really kind of pigeonhole these other guys positively into roles they're supposed to. And now I think it opens up an avenue for a guy like Will Mallory to be able to actually play in a game, because you don't have to, like, you're not having to use 2 or 3 other guys to fill these other roles. You can have, if there's a game where a defense is really susceptible to field stretching tight ends or something, boom, you have a guy that you can make active and you can actually use him this week. So I, as much as I like Tyler Warren for what he's going to do statistically and individually, I like his presence for what it allow Shane Steichen to do and his teammates as well, because I am just begging to see more of Will Mallory, for the love of God. Like, they have this guy. He's not bad. Like Zach said, he's not bad. He has a role. He's not a blocker, but the guy was one of the more talented pass catchers of that group for the last couple of years. We just weren't able to see it because they weren't able to really use him. So now I'm really hoping we get to see a little bit of Will Mallory this year.
Well, the one thing that Tyler Warren is that all the other tight ends aren't is a first round draft pick. And if you're a first round draft pick, you are expected to come in and make plays. Your talent level is supposed to be better. I look at the other tight ends, and I'm not trying to talk bad about them, but you got what? Mo Alley's undrafted free agent. Ogletree was drafted in the 6th round. I don't know when they got Mallory, but
6th round as well.
Yeah, 6th round. Yeah.
You got different expectations for guys in the 6th round than you do in the 1st round. But what that first rounder does do is allow those 6th rounders to now develop more of their game. And they actually their role becomes more beneficial to the team, because you got the one alpha dog who's going to go out and catch passes and maybe sneak in the backfield and run the wildcat and do some of these other things, because he has the talent to do it. These other guys don't have the same talent level as Tyler Warren. Otherwise, they would have been drafted in the 1st round. So I like the room, and I like it especially because of the serious upgrade you made when you got Tyler Warren.
Yeah, we're talking about the backups here, and we're talking about the full room, but to just go to Tyler Warren, man, I think he's going to have a pretty big season for a rookie tight end. I don't think it's going to be like Brock Bowers level big, because Bowers is just a unicorn out there last year, but I think Tyler Warren in this same realm is kind of a unicorn as well. It's just a different type of unicorn. He's a power player playing tight end. He's a physical monster, and he's a guy who can move across your entire formation. He can be an inline tight end. He can be out in the slot. He can be your fullback. He can be your wildcat quarterback. And when you have this offensive coach like Shane Steichen, where Shane Steichen likes to get unique with what he's doing, he likes to draw from college personnel groupings. He likes to work in a lot of things that are kind of unique to the NFL. I think when you give him a unique weapon like Tyler Warren, it's just going to be a match made in heaven. So, we had Ben Solak on our regular show earlier in the offseason. He was like, I'm not sure how to project Tyler Warren to this offense, because we've never seen Shane Steichen with a guy like this. And my thing with that is, like, we haven't really seen many teams with a player like Tyler Warren, because like, you can say he's kind of like a George Kittle, but like, even like different from a Kittle, he's so good with the ball in his hands, where he's just again, he's like having John Riggins with the ball in his hands, just the way he plays, not that level of dominance, but I think he's going to be just a really good player for this offense. I think the Colts are going to go out of their way to get him involved because they know in this offense, if you want to have, the type of stuff that they want to do to win games, or ball control, ball possession, and get first downs. Look, we drafted this tight end in round 1 because of his yards after catch ability, because of his ability to turn 3-yard gains into 10-yard gains. We're going to see a lot of screen passes to him. We're going to see a lot of trail passes to him. We're going to see some RPO throws to him. We're going to see a lot of ways to get him the ball in space and let him do his thing. I think he's going to have a pretty big season, and I think he's going to be a big part of the red zone, where the Colts have been pretty dreadful the last couple of years in the red zone. I think when you're going to get Warren with the Wildcat stuff, with the RPO stuff, with the screen game stuff, I think we're going to see a big season from Tyler Warren relative to most rookie tight ends.
I know Zach is retired as a Washington fan, but every once in a while, John Riggins, the RG3 2012 season, you get a little bit of that maroon and gold bleeding through from the childhood a little bit there. Even though obviously John Riggins way before your era, right? But every Washington fan knows him.
My grandfather told me all about it.
There you go.
He was telling me about Alan Pinkett as a local high school kid that was killing it. And then he was telling me about John Riggins as well.
Man, shots fired.
Well, no joke. I know we're running late here. My dad was like, I remember Alan running all over all the schools in our area back in because we grew up around the same area.
Yeah,
here.
it was the same time Rigo was running over everybody.
Yep. But yeah, my grandfather, my dad keep telling me it's like Alan was running for like 300 yards a game in high school against my high school. We had horror stories in our football room about Alan Pinkett. So yeah, no, that was all love there to Alan saying that. That was all love.
What was the old saying, Alan, when it was just the film? He's a 1 foot guy or a 2 foot, where you only had to look at this much film from their black and white high school days to know I want that guy on my college team.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You were one of those guys.
Well, I'm just a legend in my own mind, I guess.
More legendary moments from Alan Pinkett and the rest of the group on the Colts Squad Show. Next Sunday, we're going to have our first live game Colts show. That's going to be a lot of fun. We are your place to go. Every live game recap following each and every Colts game this season. Tune it in. Locked On Colts YouTube channel, podcast as well for the live show. So 9 p.m. Wednesday will be our next show. That'll be our midweek show. We'll go over the Dolphins. We'll talk all about that and set final expectations for the 2025 season. So set your calendars and watches accordingly. For the rest of the crew, I'm Derek Schultz. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to follow along on socials and at Locked On Colts. Check out our other great Locked On content as well, YouTube, TikTok, and we'll see you next time right here on the Colts Squad Show.